Hey guys, all right, as of right now, this is officially the second ever Rubin Report YouTube week. That's right, every day this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we're giving you brand new 1 hour, uncut, unedited interviews with some of your favorite YouTubers, some of my favorite YouTubers. There are roughly a gajillion YouTubers, but we picked some people with some interesting diversity of thought who I think you're gonna really dig and get to know in a new way if you know them already, or get to know them all together if you don't know who they are. And I wanted to do this because when we did the first one of these, I really realized what an incredibly rich community there is here on YouTube. And you know, when I started on YouTube, people would say, oh, well, you're a YouTuber. They, tweet me, well, he's a YouTuber. And I kind of didn't like it. I didn't like that phrase, but I've really come to embrace it. And I see the community here as an incredibly diverse, not only physically diverse, but intellectually diverse group of people who are coming at things from their own perspectives in totally different ways. Some doing more comedy, some doing direct to camera, some doing interviews, some doing video games, some doing some combination of all of those things. And we live in such an interesting time right now that the mainstream media is crumbling, and voices on places like YouTube, and YouTube is the #1 place to do this kind of stuff, are becoming increasingly important. And I'm excited to do this, so let's get going. Rubin Report YouTube week #2. Here we go. YouTube week continues here at the Rubin Report, and joining me today is a gamer, one of the 5 guys who brings you kind of funny videos, and most importantly, a fellow Long Islander, Colin Moriarty. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan. It's a great honor to be here with you.
A great honor?
Yes.
I don't really need to do anything else.
No, this is what you do is very important work, and I'm a big fan of the show, so it's really cool to sit in this chair here.
Oh, well. Anything else you want to get off your chest before we start here?
No, we're from Long Island, so we're genetically advanced as well, I think.
Let's talk about Long Island first, because I don't know what town you're from yet. I'm going to ask you in just a moment. Okay. But I find that a lot of people, a lot of interesting people in the arts, in comedy, in television, writing, come from Long Island.
Yep.
So first off, what town are you from?
I'm from Brookhaven, which is a small town in Suffolk County on the South Shore on the Great South Bay. It's a town of a few thousand people. The bigger town around it's Bellport, which people would know. That's the high school I went to.
Right. I am from Syosset on the North Shore. Does that make us Long Island enemies?
No, that's what's so funny is when I've talked to this about, you would understand this more, I've talked about this with people before. When someone asks where you're from Long Island, it gets smaller and smaller, where you're like, I'm from Long Island, where are you from? Suffolk County, where are you from? South Shore, where? You have to narrow it down to all these kinds of things. So, yeah. But no, I'm very familiar with Syosset. My parents are from Mineola.
Okay.
So,
that is on our Long Island Railroad train stop, a little bit before you hit Syosset from New York City. Did you like growing up in Long Island?
I loved it. It's a hugely important part, I think, of who I am. I've always really been fascinated with the idea that Long Island's one of the few places in the country, kind of like Alaska or something like that, frankly, where you don't pass through it. If you're going to Long Island, you have to actually try to go there. There's no other reason whatsoever that you would ever go there. So it's really this isolated, very interesting, very Rockefeller conservative, very strangely in the shadow of a liberal place like New York City, but not quite like New York City. And I agree with you, a lot of interesting people come there, from there. Howard Stern, Jerry Seinfeld, a lot of interesting big names. Twisted Sister, the Oyster Cult. There's all sorts of weird, things that are happening there. So I've always, as people know on Twitter, I have Long Island as my masthead, because I've always been very proud of being, and I'd like to go back to there one day, but who knows if that will ever happen.
One day you can get back there, but you do make an interesting point, because people don't think of it, even though it's called Long Island, you don't really think of it as an island. I never thought that I grew up on an island.
Nope. Yeah, but it is
per se. But yeah, you have no reason to go there. I mean, if you were to just keep going, where would you? I guess you'd end up in London, or if you just went. I mean,
if you just went straight, you'd end up in Europe.
So I guess somewhere over there. I think it has something to do with the proximity to New York City, and then that it became, even though there's a lot of parts of Long Island that are working class, it became a middle class and upper middle class place also. So there was fertile ground for young people to grow up and eventually start becoming creative.
Yeah, I think that it gave people flexibility. A lot of our parents, worked hard to give us a life on Long Island that was maybe a little bit better than what you would have had if you had to live at that time in Brooklyn or Queens or in Westchester. And my father was a New York City firefighter, so he was always gone 72 hours at a time. But we lived in he was working constantly, and I didn't think in my mind at the time, living in Brookhaven, that we lived on an acre and a beautiful house and an in-ground pool, and I took that really. At the time, I'm like, this is just my normal kind of life. And it was only in retrospect, after my parents got divorced and we sold that house and we kind of started to live a much, instead of like what I would guess called upper middle class life, more of a middle class life or even a lower middle class life, that I look back and I'm like, man, they worked really hard and tried to give us a great life. And Long Island was such a special place to call home. And I'm so very proud of it. I can't imagine being from a place that I'm not proud of,
Yeah, so are you saying that your white privilege was because your parents actually worked hard?
Yes.
And your dad worked as a firefighter, so it wasn't like he was a banker or an accountant, not that anything's wrong with that, but your parents worked hard for the privilege that you got.
My dad, I mean...
You weren't just handed everything as a white guy. That's
no, not at all. I mean, I am toxically white, no, my dad, I mean, I love my dad will watch this. My dad is the reason I'm a conservative and the reason I'm into politics at all. And he... Wallbounds, you're familiar with.
Yeah.
He worked as a manager there. At the same time, he was a firefighter. At the same time, he was doing some iron work. At the same time, he was chimney sweeping. At the same time, he was always gone. I think it was one of the reasons that my parents did end up getting divorced, because he worked very hard to make that normal, even though if he just pulled back a little bit, it wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah.
So I am the product of hard work, and what I do today, I think, is also the product of hard work. And I'm not ashamed of that. I think it's awesome. I'm not ashamed of success, and I'm not ashamed of failure. But these things have a provenance that is far beyond the fact that I'm a white man from Long Island.
Yeah, and so many people are ashamed of success. Because I could sit with a lot of people from Long Island or from anywhere else who, if they grew up upper middle class with a pool, they would be shamed into saying that as if they somehow either didn't deserve it or didn't do anything for it, even though, as you said, your dad had all these different jobs and all this kind of stuff. But being proud of success, I think, is important. And I think it's something that people need to really embrace more than they do.
I agree. I think you and I are kind of cut from the similar cloth. We're kind of like kindred spirits because we had something interesting and successful going. I was at IGN, you were doing stuff with the Young Turks and all these kinds of things, but we decided to risk it, to put everything on the table and be like, we can do something maybe better or something different on our own and cast for some independence. And that might, for myself, I can't speak for you, but for myself, might come from that bootstrap mentality. I know a lot of people like to make fun of that, the idea that anyone can achieve anything, but anyone can achieve anything in this system, which is why the United States is the best country in the world. And the proof is everywhere you look. When everyone's like, well, there's nothing better about this society, about the things that this society nurtures, that our form of capitalism and our form of freedom of expression and speech nurture. Well, I'm like, look all around you. It's everywhere. That's why everyone flocks to this place.
Well, I always think it's hilarious. I've been saying this a lot lately, but it's like everyone wants to come here still. People aren't. We got the left screaming about how horrible this country is, and at the same time, they want open borders, I guess, so that everyone can share in our horribleness.
Yeah, it's a strange. I mean, it's strange, right? Like that's why I connect so much with you, and why I connect with what your message is. Even though you're from a different, you hail from a different part of the spectrum. You've come more to the center from a left-wing perspective. I've come more to the center from a right-wing perspective. I still consider myself inherently right-wing. I have deeply held conservative views, but the utter orthodoxy, the lack of intellectual honesty and intellectual curiosity, the idea that something like open borders has any good, like is it good in any way, is strange. It's the same thing I tweeted out yesterday, where I was like, I try to think of both sides of different perspectives, and I was thinking specifically about voter ID laws because people are talking about that again, and I'm like, I don't understand the other side of this argument. Like there are just certain arguments where I'm like, this is just intellectually vapid,
Well, the voter ID thing I think is hilarious because if you ask anyone, virtually anyone, do you need a license to drive? Now I know that there's like a certain wing of the most libertarian person who would say, no, you don't. But if you just remove those people for a second, everyone would say, yes, at 18 or whatever it is in your state, you should have to take a test to make sure that you don't hop in a car and kill people. So that's a license to drive. So why wouldn't you have to have just some sort of free government-issued ID to vote? That's not racist.
No, it's not, and I hate how when this seems to be that's not exclusively left wing, but I see it much more from a liberal American base now, where you see a problem like, okay, there's some problem with the 14th Amendment and all these kinds of things with voter ID laws. People and some impoverished people, mostly maybe minorities, can't afford an ID or they don't have the transportation to get there, or whatever. I'm like, and they're like, well, so it's a problem and they don't need IDs, and I'm like, but isn't the solution just to make it easier to make it free, to subsidize them, to bring them to the place they need to go once every 7 years to get an ID? It's so strange.
Right. The idea being, well, okay, it's difficult. There could be some difficulty or some financial restraint or something. So now let's just have no regulations whatsoever. This is a case where, even though I'm a small government guy, and I think you are too, where we would say there's some use for the government to issue an ID. Make sure that, and if you're a poor person in a place that's far off the grid, that we can still get you one by the U.S. Postal Service, perhaps, or some other private company, that you will get just some ID with a picture on it that has your date of birth and says who you are, so that you can just hand that to someone for 2 seconds at the
God forbid,
voting booth. Yeah,
God forbid, because
these are radical things.
It's very radical because I often, in San Francisco, I assume it's the same here since we're in L.A., where I go into the voting place. There's a roll open. First of all, they're like, "What party are you?" I'm like, "A Republican." They take out the brush. They dust. They do an archaeological dusting of the thing. They open it, and then it's just a list of names that I can read. And I go, "Oh, I'm Mike Smith." And they're like, okay, like they can't. It's illegal for them to ask me for ID and all these kinds of things. I'm not saying people do this. What I'm saying is that principally it's just wrong. What's wrong with them saying, like, who are you coming into this polling place?
Yeah, and by the way, just to be clear, you're not making that up. Like, when I voted just in this past election, I was still living in West Hollywood, and I went there, and I had my ID ready. I thought just maybe someone's going to ask.
Right.
And you're right, they show you this list of people. When they get close to you say, my name's Dave Rubin. Well, now they're showing me a gajillion other names there. I could be Dave Rubin. I could be some other guy with an R. Oh, yeah, I'm him. And let me go to one polling place 2 minutes over and... Yeah,
it's because they refuse to purge the poll or purge the rolls. Like there's so many names on it. It's not, you really don't show any risk of like doubling up. I think mathematically, it's almost certain that you're not going to find one of these names. When you go in there, after I used to go in and work at 7, the polls close at 8, and they turn to your name. There's like one line through a list of 20 names. It's like, well, that's a 5% chance that someone's going to double up if you choose to be dishonest. I'm not saying people are choosing to be dishonest. There is no voter fraud of a major level in the United States, even though Donald Trump says there isn't. But the point is that we should make sure that there isn't, so we can just talk about something else.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to do this whole interview backwards because I was going video games first.
Okay.
But no. So we're going to do it this way.
Okay.
So let's keep going with this stuff. So I didn't know that you actually consider yourself a conservative. I thought that you consider yourself more of a libertarian. So what is a conservative to you in 2017? Because I think the definitions are getting all screwy.
The definitions are screwed up. I consider myself a conservative with libertarian leanings on the social level. I don't necessarily agree with what you were saying with the far fringe libertarian views of no government or almost anarchy.
Yeah.
Like you said, there's a play like. I guess at the local level, I think that there's the biggest place for government, and then at the state level, there's a medium place for government. At the federal level, there's the smallest place for government. And so I think conservatism is basically, even though it's a dirty word to a lot of people, to me means small government. If the government can get out of something and it's reasonable, they should get out of it. The market works well, although I am a protectionist too, so like there has to be, but an internal market, a domestic market, works unfettered with as few regulations as possible. So like little things like that, I think make up the amalgamation of what conservatism is to me, but it seems like you've said, because you and I actually agree on a lot of things, even though we call ourselves different things. I believe in the classical liberalism that you talk about.
Yeah.
I think that that's what it means, but it's so amorphous right now as things change. I mean, we forget, but a lot of people don't think about, like, the parties have changed multiple times in the past, and the Democrats were the slaveholders, right? The Republicans were the ones that freed them. But if you ask someone today, you would think that would be inversed, and ideologically it actually has been inversed, and I think we're at another inflection point where that's happening again.
And there's so much evidence of that. I mean, even if you were to look right now at what's happening with sanctuary cities, where Trump now wants to use the federal power to crack down on sanctuary cities, so now we have Democrats fighting for states' rights, so that these cities like San Francisco can remain doing what they're doing. So everything is actually backwards. In that case, I'm for states' rights. So it's an interesting position that we all find ourselves in right now.
Absolutely. San Francisco, for a lot of people that watch the show, probably never been there. Even more cartoonish than people think it is. But it's a lovely city, but it's absolutely out of control, ridiculous with all the things that are going on there. I can't believe I've even lasted there for a decade.
So how does that work for you? Because you look like you should live in San Francisco.
Yes,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I got my tech bro thing.
Yeah, it's all there, and you got 2 earrings and the glasses and the beard and all that. So you fit the San Francisco person. But if you were to go out and have a beer and you're at a bar, would you loudly say I'm a conservative? They can tar and feather you, can't
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I mean, when I worked at IGN I was senior editor of that site for years. I wore that on my sleeve in my work. I wore that. I had a huge Ron Paul sign on my desk, and all these funny little quips and memes or whatever are on my desk that would show that this is who I am. But I remember actually taking the train. I was a huge Mitt Romney supporter, actually, and I remember taking the train and the Muni back home, and I had my Mitt Romney signs that I had bought online, and they were shipped to the office. I was bringing them home to put in my window or whatever, and I remember just getting the weirdest, dirtiest looks. But I couldn't imagine. That was a more restrained time than it is now. Where if I was not even
that was the good old days.
Yeah, it was a more normal time. Even when Bill Maher's saying like I would do anything to get Mitt Romney, I agree. But I'm not a Trump supporter. But if I were a Trump supporter, I couldn't imagine having one of those red hats on or a shirt. It's unsafe, as you saw in Berkeley, which is just north of San Francisco.
Yeah.
It is not a safe time, I think, to be a conservative, an open conservative in a city like that. And I don't mean that melodramatically. Like, there's no way in God's green earth I'd wear. If I were a Trump supporter, I would have let anyone know in that city. Yeah. I'm pretty sure, I could be making this up, but I want to say Trump only got something like 8% of the vote or something in San Francisco. So we're talking about a very, very, very 10 times liberal place compared to many other places in the country.
Yeah, when you say that it's kind of crazy being there, like what are some of the policies that they have in San Francisco? Is it just constant overregulation? Like, is that the main piece of it?
It's little things and big things. It's the soda tax, for instance, right? Like, and then the unintended consequences of the soda tax and people feigning surprise when they're like, oh, a bottle of Coke's now going to cost $6. I'm like, yes, because it's 5 cents an ounce, you morons. Why didn't you read the before you vote or read these things? Not 5 cents a bottle.
Yeah.
If you're buying a 20-ounce soda, that's $1 more on that. If you're buying 2 liters, and so on and so forth. So little things like that they're inconsequential, but still infringing on our rights. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, by the way, at the same time, if the government is raising money by taxing things that are bad for you, they need you to drink a certain amount of things that are bad for you, right?
It doesn't make any sense.
If they keep raising money by raising taxes on cigarettes, well, then they need more people to smoke. It's like it's completely backwards.
It is like back in New York. My dad still. He doesn't smoke much anymore, but he still buy a pack of American Spirits every so often or whatever. And we're talking like $12 or $15 a pack of cigarettes, and then like. Is this the government trying to tell you not to smoke, or is this the government trying to be like, we're going to get it to just the right level where we know you're still going to smoke, it won't affect you, but we'll just steal as much money from you as humanly possible?
Yeah.
In San Francisco, you see little things like that, and then you see bigger things. The sanctuary city stuff. I think the sanctuary city stuff is nuts. It's nuts. It's just absolutely fucking crazy.
Yeah.
That anyone would think that's okay. That we should treat. In no other country in the world, Dave, as you know, in no other first world country would you ever be like, everyone just. Come on in, and once we have a significant amount of people here, we're just going to maybe legalize everyone and give them. I'm like, nah, I don't think so. That's not okay with me. It's not a racist thing. It's not a bigoted thing. It's not a pro-American nationalist thing. It's a rational point of view that we can control our borders, that we can control those things. So living in a city like that, where they won't help ICE or they won't do those kinds of things to arrest criminals, as we saw with the death of I can't remember that woman's name that Trump always talked about that happened in San Francisco, I believe. It's sad to me, and it doesn't make sense. It's another one of those policies where I'm like, I do not understand the other side.
Well, it's about feelings, right? The people that live there, the average leftist or liberal or whatever that lives there is sitting there going, I want these people to feel they can have what I have, and they feel good when they're saying it. It sounds right.
Right.
And then next thing you know, you bring in people, and they're doing illegal things, and they're bringing in drugs and all this stuff. And suddenly you go, oh, maybe this wasn't the right thing to do, but it's too late.
Exactly, and that's the whole thing that I think Reagan found himself in the 80s. I think that's another thing that even Bush found himself in with a lot of people forget that there was a fervor, and we were really on the precipice of legalization of legalizing illegal immigrants in like 2006. I remember that very well. And it's not a matter of Listen, the reason I don't like Donald Trump is mostly because of who he is. Like, I don't like the messenger. I don't necessarily dislike some of the message, and I've been very open about that. I believe in strong borders. I believe in in a sort of American pride and all those kinds of things. But I think that one of the things he lacks, that he can't communicate for some reason, because he can't communicate almost anything effectively, because he's really just awful at oration, is why can't you just communicate that it's not about an illegal criminal? It's not about necessarily drug running. It's not necessarily about the about these terrible rapes or these murders that happen very seldom rather. It's just about law. It's just about reason. It's just about right and wrong, about controlling your borders, about resources going to the people that deserve them the most, which are the people that pay into the system. So I don't, when I see these systems like this in San Francisco, it just gets me so angry, because that bubble is real, man. Like, they really do think the rest of the country is shit, and a lot of those people. And I fought the good fight during the primary and during the campaign to be like, I'm not going to vote. I voted for Gary Johnson, but I'm not going to vote for Trump. I voted for Kasich in the primary. But there is a whole group of people out there that don't understand your point of view. And instead of yelling at them and calling them Nazis and fascists, words that, by the way, most of you have no idea what the fuck they mean, maybe try reasoning with them and explaining your point of view. And then they can explain their point of view. And then we can have less orthodoxy and meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So for you, with all of these ideas that to a guy like me sound pretty sane and rational, but for someone that lives in San Francisco, and you're an online guy, we know online skews young in general. You're talking about video games a lot and a whole bunch of other stuff. Your audience must not be fully on board some of this stuff.
No,
right?
no.
How do you deal with that?
I deal with it the best I can, is all I can say. I mean, I think that, first of all, my business partners are very patient, because I think that they realize, and what I've realized, which is that we are going to lose some people because of my outspokenness. The other guys don't really care about politics. They don't know much about politics. I'm not even sure they really have much of an ideological bent. I think that they're all pretty central or centrist. But they let me go off on my tangents, and they never tried to shut me up or anything like that. And I get tweets often where they're like, "I'm done with you guys. I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore." And I'm like, "Well, I don't want you anyway." Like, if you have such a closed mind that you can't even hear a different side, a totally reasonable side of a different of an argument. I'm not calling for anything crazy. Actually, when people are like, "You're crazy," or "You're alt-right," or whatever, I'm like, what am I saying that's nuts? So when I see that kind of stuff, I often think that yes, there is a deficit there, but I actually think we bring in way more people, because the hidden secret, especially in video games, that I know all too well, is that there are way more conservatives and libertarians in the gaming space than people know. It's just that they're afraid. They'll tell me, but they're afraid to say anything. We're talking about people as high as the leads of studios to all the way down the rung to QA testers and the lowest rung of a video game studio, people in publications and all those kinds of things. The only part of the game spectrum that is almost exclusively liberal is the media, which is what gives this paint, this facade that everything is that way, but it's not. There are plenty of us that play video games. There are plenty of us that use YouTube and like the internet and like Twitter and all those kinds of things. They're just afraid. That's it.
So that's a pretty powerful message right there, because I think we're getting a lot of that right now from the mainstream media in general. I think most people are sort of woke, although that word is a little cliche these days. I think most people are woke to a lot of this stuff, and they're getting more woke every day. But the media has tricked everyone into doing exactly the things that you're talking about. They're so afraid now of being called racist and bigot and all those things that people aren't. You'd watch a video game show and go, uh-oh, somebody said something I don't like, and I don't want to post that on my Facebook feed, because then someone will think that, well, one of the 5 guys said something that I don't agree with, and da-da-da-da-da. That's a scary place to be.
Yep, absolutely, and that's why I try to push the envelope as much as possible with some jokes that I tell, or some, not that I'm a comedian, you actually have a common background. I don't, I think I'm unintentionally funny.
I used to be funny a long time ago.
But with the specific situation of our morning show that we do, I do that much less, but we do a morning show on Twitch every day, every weekday, that I started, that was kind of inspired by like Morning Joe, and which I actually really enjoy, and like PTI and some of the ESPN stuff, because I'm really into sports. So something outside of games. And what I realized was that people kind of like it when you say something inappropriate, or that society in 2017 or 2016 or 2015 deems inappropriate. Because I always come out with this, like, I'm not a racist. I'm not a bigot. I'm not a sexist. I don't hate women. I don't hate anybody. Like if you believe that about me, that's your choice. And I remember my father saying something really powerful to me when I was a kid, which was, it's very simple and almost mundane, but if it only matters if you know the truth about yourself. If that's really kind of the shining light. If everyone else thinks something else of you, regardless, you know what's in your heart, and I know what's in my heart. So I'm going to say what I need to say, and I always say, like, I'm not ashamed of being white. I'm not ashamed of being male. I'm not ashamed of being straight. I'm not ashamed of being an American. I'm not ashamed of any of this. Like, I didn't do anything to anyone. I live my life. I don't have a ticket to my name. I didn't do anything to you. You know, like I treat everyone with respect. I'm a please and thank you kind of guy. I hold doors open for people. I send thank you cards. I do all the, you know, like all the little things, the little kind of pieces that make a person, I think, good and thoughtful. So that's what matters. If you can't take a joke that I make about a Nazi, or you can't take a joke I make that might be a racial joke or something, that's on you. I don't care. Like, that doesn't make me a racist, and that doesn't make me a bigot.
Yeah, and yet we live in a time where you know that over the course of this hour, you could say accidentally one thing that you just slightly, you know, word the wrong way, and then the meme comes out about it, and then 1,000 people tweet it. But I guess your bigger point stands, which is you know you are not those things, and it is what it is.
Right, exactly, and it's one of those issues. I mean, at the beginning of the show, I said, like, if we're from Long Island, we're genetically advanced, right? Someone's going to think, like, that's a stupid...
That's a fact, though.
It is. But it's a flippant kind of thing you say, and you throw it out there, and I'll never think about it again. Yeah, someone out there is going to think, well, he believes in eugenics? You know, or something like crazy like that. I'm like, no, it's a joke, dude. It's a joke. You know, like, I want to loosen things up and shake things up, and just in my small little sphere, in my small little way. I'm an insignificant person. I'm one of the most insignificant people that's ever sat in this chair across from you. I watch this show. You know, you have the Glenn Becks on, you have the Ben Shapiro's on, you have all these big names. I'm a smaller name that's not known for politics, but politics happens to be my biggest passion, way more than video games, and it always has been. I got all these tattoos on my arms when I studied American history.
Maybe we should switch jobs. I'm starting to think, because I should be going back into video games. You could be doing this.
I'm happy to do that. I wish
Maybe we'll do like a weekly swap or something.
Sure, I love that. But I think that there's, you know, if you look at the Venn diagram of everyone's interests, about gamers, about people that are maybe into film or cinema or into television, there's a political overlap with a lot of people. People have passions, and they have kind of leanings, and that should be embraced. If someone leans left, or someone even leans socialist or something like that, well, that's perfectly fine. Let's have a reasonable discussion about that. Yeah. But this orthodoxy, I'll give you an example. Right after the election, there was a great piece. I want to say it was in Hollywood Reporter or something like that about Steve Bannon, who's, you know, the boogeyman, everyone. Yeah. And all I tweeted out was, like, I think I tweeted out literally verbatim, this is an interesting piece. What an interesting and smart man. No endorsement of him.
You're going to pay for that one.
Man went to Oxford and Harvard, so some of the best institutions in the entire world, ran a bunch of businesses. I'm not endorsing what he's saying. I don't read Breitbart. I don't care about that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is, what an interesting and smart man. Yeah. Period. But this is taken out of context to be like, well, Colin endorses Trump, or Colin, you know, is alt-right, or all these things. I'm like, no, guys, there is plenty of gray area. Why can't we talk about things in such a way that lets us investigate something, that lets us not draw lines in the sand, that's saying one person is bad and one person's good, or this is immediately this or immediately that. Like I said, there's no intellectual curiosity anymore. That brings us to this point where we're butting heads with each other. And I think what I've found, frankly, that I think you found a long time ago, is that I'm an unwitting culture warrior. Like, I'm in. You know, like, I'm gonna fight.
Yeah, so I love that, obviously. And does that lead you to believe something that Paul Joseph Watson is saying now a lot? And I know even if I had him on the show, which made people think I was a conspiracy theorist and blah, blah, blah.
An interesting man.
I listened to the guy for an hour. Yeah, every time I retweet him, people go completely bananas.
RTs are not endorsements.
Yes, they're not endorsements. Sometimes I do agree with him. Sometimes he says something interesting, whatever it is. But he's been saying lately that conservatism is the new counterculture. Do you buy that?
Yes, I think that's. I think some people are saying punk rock and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know enough about the '70s punk scene to even know if that's true or not. But yes, clearly, because the orthodoxy comes from the left. The stagnation of thought comes from the left. All this, you know, the not. A good example is, everyone's like, well, it's my free speech to counter your free speech. And I'm like, of course it is.
Absolutely.
But we all know that the intent on one side is not to counter it, it's to squash it. When I say, when a person says, like, I like Donald Trump, and then another person says, I don't like Donald Trump, well, that's the exercise of equivalent free speech. When someone says, I like Donald Trump, and someone says, you're a bigot and you're Nazi and you're a racist and you should be ashamed of yourself and your entire family shit and your entire state shit and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's not free speech. That's actually insulting, that's actually demeaning, that's actually trying to bully someone out of a point of view. And that's not what's happening. What happened at Berkeley, I'm not a Milo fan at all. I've never been. I think he's an interesting dude. I've listened to a lot of his speeches. I think he has some interesting points. It was interesting to watch him kind of fall apart over the last couple of weeks. But you know, I kept saying to people, even before all that stuff came out about him afterwards, where I'm like, if he just went to that speech and there was an empty auditorium and everyone was going about their business and going to class and all that kind of stuff, that would have destroyed him.
Yeah.
You know, but you gave him all this attention, and it heightens them simply because you don't want to have a conversation. And if you think they're so wrong, if you think this point of view is so wrong, then why are you afraid to debate it? It's so strange to me. If you're so powerful, if you're so philosophically right, if you're so educated and intellectual, then what are you so afraid of? That like
I guess it's easier to burn shit and tell people to go fuck themselves, which is unfortunately tactics that we're seeing only from one side these days.
Exactly. I mean, I don't like painting necessarily with a broad brush all the time about, well, it's just the left. There's fucking assholes on the right, like terrible people that make all of us look bad. And I'm never going to say the Richard Spencers of the world and all those kinds of guys. Really deplorable kind of points of view, but. You know, I had this personal example of this. There's this guy that's always kind of picking on me in the gaming industry, this really small kind of media guy, that I've kind of just let go. People have pointed out to me over the years, like, oh, this guy's talking shit and blah, 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 in the subtweets or whatever. So eventually I called him out on Twitter. He said something terrible about me. I tweeted him out. I'm like, listen, I'll invite you to our Kind of Funny studios. I'll put $2,000 of my own money on the line and give it to a charity of your choice. If you sit down with me for an hour and we'll let an audience, an unbiased audience, decide who wins. We can have an unbiased moderator. I won't know the questions. You won't know the questions. Come, $2,000.
Yeah.
For a charity of choice. You can do the ACLU, the Planned Parenthood, whatever. I don't care.
Can I guess?
Please.
You've never heard from him since?
Oh, no. He never even tweeted back at me. He just continues to subtweet as if he's a courageous warrior.
That's even worse. So
yep.
He doesn't even acknowledge the challenge and then keeps doing his thing.
Coward. Wow. They're called cowards.
Yeah, that's a real coward.
Yeah. And you know, here I am, my face in a chair, talking to a person that I might not agree with about everything, although we do agree with a lot of things, putting myself out there in such a way like, I believe in this stuff. I'm going to fight you on this stuff if I have to, and at least we can have a debate, and we could probably be friends afterwards as well. I know plenty of people on the far left end of the spectrum. I went to Northeastern University, which is a very liberal Boston private college. I was the farthest right thing in the world. I mean, when I was in 2002, 2003, 2004, I was George Bush and war in Iraq and all those kinds of things, and I was wrong about that stuff. I was totally wrong about that, and I'll admit that now. But I wasn't afraid to stand up in my American history classes. I studied American history. I wasn't afraid of standing up and being like, but what about this? What about this? Challenging people. Some people in my classes hated me, but a lot of people I actually became great friends with that were like, well, I'd never thought about that perspective, or thank you for sharing that perspective, and what an interesting thing. My favorite historian is Howard Zinn, who history people know is a far left, considered to some people a loon. And I think his People's History of the United States of America is a must-read account of American history that you won't read in, say, a Henry Adams book or a Gordon Wood book, you know? Because I like to be challenged like that. So when people like to just live in their little bubble, in their little echo chamber, and they're so scared of anyone else and anyone else's opinions, that only says to me that you're easy to beat and that your ideas suck. Because if they didn't, then you wouldn't be afraid to sit in a chair across from me or a table across from me and debate me on that issue.
I'm curious, have you lost any friends in the course of the last year and a half or so?
Yes.
Because a lot of people, I know I lost a lot of friends, not my choice. I found some better friends, that's all right. But so you lost some friends in the course
Definitely.
of this.
And I've lost, I think not even, I've definitely lost friends, but I think I've lost respect from some people too, that think that I'm, I used the word before, but that I'm flippant. I think a lot of people that know me personally, I'm friends with some, you know, like I said, games media is pretty exclusively left wing. I'm by far the most prominent conservative in old school games media. There are people on YouTube that are way bigger than me.
Right.
But I think people think often that, how dare you say this? You know, it's not a matter of like, well, I know Colin. I've broken bread with Colin. I've gone on trips with Colin. I know Colin's a good guy, but how dare you? You know, like kind of more something like that. And I've had private conversations, and I've had things like this. I mean, the thing that bothers me so much, Dave, is that with the thing with the coward we were talking about on Twitter some weeks ago, I got all sorts of messages from people being like, "What the fuck's this guy's problem? This guy's insane. This guy's a loser." You know, no one said it publicly though. Yeah. Because they didn't want to come, you know, on the side of someone that, you know, well, ideologically we might have some disagreements. They didn't want to protect the person that they've known for years publicly because that might make them look bad. I mean, that was my interpretation of it, but that didn't stop them from DMing me or texting me or emailing me.
Yeah, and of course, that's an incredible piece of cowardice, and it also goes against the advice that your dad gave you a long time ago about you have to know what's in your heart. So if they don't know exactly what's in their heart, they won't put themselves on the line to defend you, even if they know that you're a totally honorable person and just saying what you believe and all that, whether they agree with you or not.
Exactly, and I try not to hold it against them because it is scary. Like the gaming industry is an incredibly orthodox kind of thing from the outside perspective because, again, of the illustration of the media based on all of this kind of stuff. The fact is that, you know, I worked with a staff of many people, 20, 25 people on the editorial staff when I was senior editor. And I don't know that any of the other people would have ever voted Republican or done anything like that, and that's fine. But that goes to show you, like, not just liberals or Bernie Sanders fans or Hillary Clinton fans play video games, but these people don't feel like they have a voice. Now, I thought the whole Gamergate thing was absurd, and I didn't get involved in that at all. Like, I hate both sides of that argument because it became very abusive. It's exactly what we're talking about. Like, there's no reason for this to just sink to this incredibly dire level of people just disrespecting each other and hurting each other, and that's not what I'm about.
Yeah.
You know?
Wait, let's pause for a second. So for the people that don't know anything about Gamergate, I've talked about it a little bit. Can you give me like a 30-second, just very base recap that I know will get everyone angry at you no matter what you say? Just because I think there's some relevance to Gamergate and what's happening in mainstream media right now.
My interpretation of it, if you actually even look on Twitter, like, I never once talked about it. I'm just like, I don't want anything to do with this. My interpretation of it, and I think that it's like one of these things that everyone will have a different interpretation of it, as you said, is there seemed to become this overt emphasis on so-called social justice or so-called like forced diversity or gender diversity or whatever in games, of people complaining that there were too many white men as a protagonist in a video game or whatever. This coupled with some, I think, kind of strange articles coming out from fringe media outlets that kind of rallied up people's anger about these kinds of things. And I think quickly it wasn't about anything. Quickly, I think it was just a complete abject culture war between two sides that I think were. I remember watching it. I would go on Twitter and look at the hashtag every day in like 2014, late 2014, early 2015, and kind of just see sometimes because I was afraid that they were going to turn their cannons on me. And you never know, like, when someone turns on you, like what could happen or whatever. And I just looked at this and I was like, this is fucking insane. Like this is so crazy. Like, why are people so mean to each other? Why are people being so abusive to each other, saying these terrible things? I would never say something like that. One of the things that I try to attack ideas, and if you're a politician or something, I'll attack you, but I will never go after an individual on Twitter or something like that, unless they go after me first, in which case I'll defend myself. And I didn't like how personal that whole thing became. So that's a really bad explanation of it. I mean, I hated seeing that, and I walked away having no respect for both sides, to be honest.
Yeah, but do you see the trends of that trickling up to mainstream now? Because I really see it happening between not only just a guy like Milo who trolled the world and now it's blown up in his face, and I suspect there will be a return of Milo at some point.
I suspect so.
But even what happened with the Wall Street Journal attacking PewDiePie last week. Like, all of this stuff, I sense like the internet people becoming too powerful, and now the mainstream is going to crack down on them because guys like you and all these other people are gaining real audiences that the mainstream no longer has.
Yeah, I mean, and you're another huge component that's much bigger than I am, because they're dying. They're gone. I was talking with your makeup artist before I came on, and we were watching CNN, and I was saying, like, you were saying, like, who watches this shit?
It seems ridiculous. Doesn't it seem ridiculous?
Yeah, and I'm like, well, if you look at the Nielsen ratings, maybe 150,000 people are watching this right now. It's nothing. Dave Rubin's videos will get more views than that, today. No. And to me, they're scared, and I don't blame them. I'd be scared too if I was definitely going to die. So it's not a matter of it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I was remarking that there was a Wall Street Journal article that I retweeted yesterday about how the trends are showing that TV viewership per minute by minute in the United States per month is now being eclipsed by YouTube. In other words, people are watching more YouTube than they are television by minute per capita. And I'm like, well, the die's cast, it's over. So now it's a matter of how this happens, and I'd be scared too. It reminds me, we used to have this old argument in video game media. I started writing about games professionally in 2002 when I was 18, when I was a freshman in college. And we used to talk about how we took so much pride in killing the magazines. We killed them. We absolutely killed them. And well, now YouTube's going to kill them. And that's the way. And it's not just YouTube. It can be any platform. But Twitter, Facebook, just using those things. I post a political message on Facebook. It gets circulated a few thousand times. Well, that's pretty powerful stuff. That's probably getting circulated more than some of these fringe MSNBC shows that are on at 2 in the afternoon that no one really cares about. That are playing in a bar somewhere.
Right. Well, that's what I was thinking during this whole PewDiePie thing, as Wall Street Journal's turning on him. The guy, I don't even know his work that well. I know he does some silly videos and he does video game stuff and all that. But this guy has something like 9 million Twitter followers. I have no idea how many YouTube people. Do you have any idea?
It's something it's 55 million.
55 million subscribers.
I think he's something like 20 million ahead of the next person.
Right, so think about that. If this guy has 55 million subscribers, we're going to crack 400,000 next week.
Congratulations.
So, thank you very much, although that's real shit compared to this PewDiePie. But the point is that by the Wall Street Journal going after him, it's only a win for them, even though he's obviously not a Nazi, and I have no reason to believe he's a racist, and maybe he made a bad joke. You can argue whether it was in poor taste or whatever. I don't even think it was that. But it's only a win for them to go after him because they know they're going to get clicks off him. So it's like, you've created this monster now where they need these people who have made them irrelevant so that they can grasp their last bit of relevance.
Yeah, they call it death throws. And
they're in the death throws.
Yeah, and it's you know, what I was so fascinated about with the PewDiePie thing, I didn't think what he did was necessarily in good taste, and like, I don't know him personally. I've had some private correspondence with him, in I think a DM or something, and we've tweeted back and forth a couple times. But he's a big deal. By the way, he makes like $15 million a year. So this is a guy that is well financially eclipsing a lot what a person in a newsroom would make, and there's some jealousy there, I think, absolutely. And jealousy is an innate primal thing. Like I don't castigate anyone for being like, I wish I was that, But it's about how you act when you're in those situations. And these are people that reaped what they sowed. I'm not saying that anyone should be abusive to anyone. I'm not saying I would never do something like that. But what the hell did you expect? Like, you didn't know what you were doing. First of all, they dishonestly portrayed what he was doing.
Right.
And then the big surprise was that all YouTubers, big YouTubers, prominent YouTubers that had nothing to do with video games, were all rallying to his cause. And the reason that is, and including me, is because like we want the media to die because they don't serve a function or a purpose in 2017 anymore. They did lie throughout the election. This is the fascinating thing, Dave, about what happened with Trump and all these kinds of things. They don't get it. They
still don't get it.
It's insane. Like, you would think that there would be some honest reflection. The very fact that even Keith Ellison, for instance, was even in the running for DNC chair is incredible arrogance. It's not even ignorance. It's just like, you're just going to continue down this road over and over again.
Yeah.
And what do they say about insanity, of course? And it's this very kind of situation to me where they don't understand that Trump won in part because people don't like them. And that's what, and that Donald Trump was the worst. I know my American history pretty well.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is by far the worst mainstream presidential candidate, at least in the 20th and 21st centuries. If you want to go further back, you probably can. I mean, people were referencing Zachary Taylor and all these kinds of things as similar kind of characters and creatures of politics that came out of nowhere. But they're just like, no, we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Well, Hillary Clinton, who was an awful candidate, who I have a special hatred for, and a lot of people know that, especially because we're Long Islanders and the Rick Lazio connection and all that kind of stuff. People can read about that. But
I know about Rick Lazio. Nobody else knows about Rick Lazio, but I know.
Who was our native son.
Yeah.
But apart from that, she was so weak that she lost to Donald Trump. And instead of taking a look at themselves, I mean, man, what did we do wrong? We have to change. We have to get the white working class voters. We have to go to these places. It was so arrogant to go to Nebraska to get that loose vote when we could have went to Wisconsin or we could have went to Michigan and went to a car plant or something like that. They lost because they're fucking terrible at politics.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the message, it's the messenger. And the message is a problem too. But they just refuse to look at it from that scoop. So when I look at 2018, and I'm like, well, the map looks awful for the Senate for them. They're going to lose Senate seats. But can you regain seats in the House? Well, you don't seem like you even really care because you're doubling down on the same stuff. The way I look at it is I know people that voted for Donald Trump. And they're good people. They're nice people. They're kind people. They work hard. They do all these kinds of things. But when you tell me that you hate them, when you tell me that they're assholes, that they're ignorant, that they don't care about anything, that they don't care about black people, they don't care about women, well, I'm like, fuck you. Those are my people, and I'm actually going to side with them over you, even though I don't agree with their candidate, simply because you disparage them.
I have to believe that some of this is a little Long Island something, because I've mentioned a good friend of mine, my best friend since I'm 4 years old, another Long Islander, obviously, who did not care about politics at all until this past year, and then became a huge Trump supporter. And it was purely for exactly the reasons you're talking about. It almost had nothing to do with politics or issues or any of that stuff. It was basically just like, fuck you to all of you people who have relentlessly lied and smeared and coordinated with campaigns and media, and all of you, just, that's it. We're not going to take it anymore.
It's incredible that, I'm not saying Donald Trump is a pathological liar. I'm not going to sit here and say that he is, and he obviously is. The point, and that's why I refused to vote for him. That's why I was disgusted with what the Republican Party did, especially with guys that could have cleaned Hillary Clinton's clock, like Kasich would have won easily.
You couldn't have been thrilled pulling the thing for Gary Johnson, though, right?
No, I mean, I
voted for him too, and believe me, it was the most depressing. I did not. I've said this before. I did not know what I was going to do as I was driving to to the polling station. Think how crazy that. I mean, this is what I do for a living.
Right.
I'm in this 24 hours a day, and I genuinely didn't know what I was going to do. And then you know, in California, we have a certain luxury here that we could both vote for Gary Johnson.
Right.
And we know it's not going to do anything. But it didn't feel good to me.
It didn't feel good to me either. It felt fine for a while. Like I think Bill Weld is a really interesting character, and I think that if the ticket was in reverse, I think that Bill Weld would have actually been on the stage during one of the debates, and I think that he could have at least had a Ross Perot-like showing, because that guy's really smart. That
guy needs a shot of espresso, though.
Yeah, he's very low energy.
Yeah, come on, guys.
But he's I remember watching. I was on a plane coming back from a business trip, I think, and they did their town hall on CNN. Gary Johnson is an interesting guy. I mean, he's a two-term governor. He's a smart man, an athletic kind of guy, very diverse kind of like hobbies and stuff. He seems like a human being, and that's what I liked about him. Like, he's like a human being. He's like, yeah, I smoke weed and I like to do bike, and by the way, I'm into politics. It's supposed to be these guys that are like, you know, act like they're just that they're just the political beings in Washington D.C. that I hate so much. But watching him deteriorate over those weeks with all this crazy shit, the Aleppo thing was bad, but I also got mad about that because I'm like, I don't think any of you that are complaining on Twitter even knew what Aleppo was either. So that was the thing
of course they don't. Of course.
So that was the thing that really bothered me. But then the whole like that weird MSNBC interview with his tongue. Yeah, exactly. It was so strange.
Yeah.
I didn't feel good about it.
In a way, was it just that was the only way he could get attention, was these stupid moments? So the Aleppo thing, the tongue thing, when he couldn't name a leader he liked, not that he was doing these things intentionally, but the only time mainstream would even touch him was when he did something awful, basically, because they just have no vested interest otherwise in showing some libertarian ideas or some classic liberal ideas or some smaller government ideas.
Yeah, I think that's the case too. I think that he tried, and it was that was my fourth presidential election. I voted Bush. I actually voted Obama in 2008, and because I hated Sarah Palin, I couldn't. And then I voted for Romney, and then I voted for Johnson. So that was out of the four of them, the one I was least confident in. But I knew that. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs when he was still the best candidate. I mean, I said that to this day. I'm like, given the four candidates, Jill Stein's a nut job. So given the four of them, I think Gary Johnson would have still been the best president, to be perfectly honest with you.
So as a guy that doesn't think Trump is honest, and probably thinks he's probably a little more big government than you would want him to be.
He's a strange creature.
How do you decide how to either accept some of his stuff or not, or fight it? I mean, my feeling at the moment is, and I've had some people say, you're not fighting Trump enough. I don't know that enough has happened yet. The executive orders basically is all that's happened so far. I was against them when George W. Bush was doing them. I was against them when Obama was doing them. I still don't like them now. We've given too much power to the executive branch. That's not an issue with Trump specifically, as much as just the way the Congress has just ceded power to the presidency. But beyond that, he hasn't done that much yet. Even if I don't like, DeVos doesn't seem like a particularly bright person to be leading the education department, but she hasn't done anything yet. So how do you decide how you can approach criticizing him or supporting him?
Well, I think that's what is confusing to people about you and I and other people in our sphere, where it's I'm not just punching Donald Trump all day. I'm like, well, like yesterday I tweeted out, I watched his. We're recording this the day after the State of the Union, and I was like, well, that was a good speech, actually. Perfectly reasonable speech.
Yeah.
And they're meaningless. I mean, he's constitutionally bound to do these things. Strange, by the way, a fascist would do a constitutionally bound thing like the State of the Union address, but nonetheless. I looked at that and I was like, that was a reasonable speech, and with some reasonable ideas. It was something you can see in him, something that Steve Bannon gave that interview, I guess, in the New York Times or something like a week or two ago. One of the things that resonated with me that he said was, the United States has a reason to be, and we actually do have a culture that has a reason of existing. And I like that Donald Trump seems willing to protect that. That we've always been looked at by the rest of the world as this country that is an amalgamation, a melting pot, which we are. We're a very unique historical kind of thing in that regard. But we do have a unique culture. We do have the world takes all of our culture, actually. And I like that someone is willing to say, we have an America that's American, that's okay. And so when I see things like that, I'm willing to defend Donald Trump. But when he lies or says things that are untrue, when he's so focused on optics, which I think is a huge mistake, especially for an early president. But you're right you're very right in the sense that the imperial presidency has gotten out of control. I do not like executive orders either. They've been signed since the beginning, but this is a rubber band effect. The rubber banding is a a gaming term, meaning that when you're in a Mario Kart or something, when you're winning consistently, the game will rubber band, meaning that the people in the behind will get advantages that will sling them forward, and to make it more even. And I feel like the imperial presidency obviously is a product of FDR and is a reaction to Hoover and Coolidge and Harding and their kind of hands-off attitude and their laissez-faire attitude during the Gilded Age that led us to this calamitous kind of thing that people thought was a result of hands-off government, which I don't agree. And so it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And the one thing that I wish Donald Trump would do that he's not doing clearly and he won't do and that we can't expect him to do is just someone to say, like, I want to be a Warren Harding kind of character, not necessarily in the quality of his presidency, but being like, the Congress should pass bills. I will sign them or I will veto them. I'm not here to be the king or the monarch or the totalitarian dictator or the authoritarian. So I see a lot of that. Like when people call him fascist, I'm like, well, you don't know what the word means. He's not a fascist at all. But does he have authoritarian, more like single party views? Yeah, and that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. So is the saving grace then that our institutions and our checks and balances, do you think they're still strong enough to withstand that? If he went to the worst parts of himself, that might be the real authoritarian parts, and really grabbing more power. And we know we just have a House and a Senate and a Congress that they just do nothing. What bills are they putting forward so far? Everyone keeps screaming about Trump doing all this stuff, he's doing all this stuff. Are they talking about, have you heard anything about a bill?
No.
Is anyone putting a bill together?
Nope.
People need to watch that, like 1983 cartoon about the bill. You know, there's that one, the bill. He's a cartoon Bill, and he's doing something on Capitol Hill. He's singing and something. Like, why are people asking Congress, guys, do something? Otherwise, Trump is just going to keep doing it. But I think there's something otherwise interesting here about video game culture and internet culture and all that, which is the outrage thing. Like all of these people that still don't get it, as you said before, who are just waiting for his tweets to be outraged, and that doesn't do anything. Right? Like it doesn't actually move the dial.
That's another example of the rubber band effect, but not the way that they would want it, right? Because a good example is the Kellyanne Conway tweet, or the picture going on around her about the couch. She
put her feet on the couch.
It's also completely dishonest. If you look at pictures of her, she was on her knees trying to get out of a shot to take a picture that she was probably going to tweet or use for some reason. But that doesn't matter because she has her feet on the couch. But then a million pictures of Obama having his feet on Queen Victoria's desk, which I have no problem with. He's relaxing. He's in the office. It's his office. But guys, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Like I don't understand. This is the dishonesty that's destroying the media. It's the same thing that reminded me of one of the most resonant pictures I saw in the election was a picture in North Carolina of Donald Trump on stage with a gay pride flag. This was a really powerful picture. I was like, wow, it's incredible. I mean, not only was the RNC thing or the convention thing interesting where he talked about transgender and gay people or whatever and that there with him.
And got a standing ovation, by the way, while he was doing it.
Exactly. But this picture goes around and everyone's like, I'm like, but he's against gay people and all these things. I'm like, guys, no, he's not. Like I'm not saying he's good. I'm not saying he's right. What I'm saying is you're being dishonest, and that starts us at a dishonest point. And it comes from this outrage culture because there's all these expectations that like this. I like how you're going on about his steak, for instance, with the ketchup.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, this is anything he does, he breathes. And I'm telling you right now, and you know this, and I know this, and I hope everyone knows this, although so many people don't. Do this for a few more months, and watch what happens. First of all, his numbers are going to go up after the State of the Union address. But watch, people are going to start really, really, really getting angry at the left because they're like because it becomes mean-spirited. And America can be a lot of things. America could be a bully. America could be a lot of things. But push comes to shove, America doesn't really like mean-spiritedness on this wide level. And there's going to be normal people in Ohio and Long Island and all these people. This is rude. And I'm a sports fan simply because so many people hate him.
Yeah, and the steak thing I thought was particularly interesting because they'll try to paint Trump as an elitist. Now, I get it. Trump comes from a shit ton of money. He's had money his whole life, all that stuff, all the businesses, the gold-plated chairs, and the gaudy furniture, and all that stuff.
Awful use of money, yeah.
But these people on the left that are saying Trump's an elitist, and then they're upset that he eats steak like an everyman. There's a lot of people that do like a well-done piece of meat. It's just a fact. There's a lot of people who put ketchup on a steak. I like a rare steak. That's what I prefer.
Yep.
But the mocking. But it's not even just about the mocking of the specific instance as much as they're wasting their cachet on it, right? Like,
yes.
You get outraged enough, and then it's like the boy who cried wolf. Then when something actually really is bad, people are like, I don't have anything left to listen to this nonsense.
It's exactly how Trump, we're going back to the lessons of the past in terms of how Trump got elected to begin with. It is a boy who cries wolf situation. Mitt Romney was a Nazi. George Bush was a Nazi. John McCain was a Nazi.
Right, and now they're trying to paint all those guys as great, right? Isn't that the funny thing?
Yep.
The revisionism where they're suddenly like, oh, now, just this week, George W. Bush, because he finally said something about Trump in the press. Now, suddenly everyone's going, George Bush, he doesn't like him, and, come on, Bush.
And everyone's like, oh, he's the thing that bothers me so much, I don't like to talk about things I don't understand or I don't know about, and I don't try to stand on my high horse and be like, I know this and you don't, but it's like, everyone's like, George W. Bush is the worst president of all time. I'm like, no, he's not. No, he's not. Not even historians think that. Like, there's a thing called the Schlesinger poll, which is like scholars rank the presidents every so often. We used to obsess over them when I was in college. George W. Bush is not the worst president in the United States. And everyone's like, well, he's going to be George W. Bush is the worst president, so Trump's going to be even worse. I'm like, actually, the worst president is considered like James Buchanan and Hoover. But you guys don't know that because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, because all you want to do is hammer people on all this stupid shit that, like you said, is going to come back and haunt you when push comes to shove, when it really matters most. And that's how Trump got elected to begin with, because Romney was a Nazi too, and so was McCain.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm guessing you know who Steven Crowder is, right?
Yes.
So I was watching a video that he did, and I thought he made an interesting point a couple weeks ago. He was saying how you can't give these guys an inch, because the second you give them an inch, they're going to take more. Now that in and of itself isn't a particularly new thought, but his overriding point was that this is what they constantly do. They get, whoever's in office is now is Hitler. And then we can now look back and go, Romney was okay. He didn't really hate women, right. And Bush didn't, all of these things. And that's why if you give them anything, they'll just keep taking. It's just about who's in power and who can we demonize the most. And there's just nothing honest about it.
No, there's not. And I think it's destructive, and it ruins polity. It ruins the ability of us to meet in the middle, because I don't believe in orthodoxy. I don't believe in right-wing orthodoxy either. I actually think the left wing has some interesting ideas that I'd like to discuss. I've often said, I fundamentally believe the government should get out of everything that it doesn't need to be in. But I also think the government should make smart investments that will cost lots of money in order to maybe make revenue or make a profit. I talked about on our show a couple weeks ago about how I was just playing around with this idea, not necessarily a unique idea, but could the government fund NIH, for instance, National Institute of Health, 10 times more than they do now? Find the best scientists from Pfizer and all these kind of medical scientists, great medical minds, create medicines that the United States can then sell to the rest of the world for the 7 years that they can make a profit on it, that we can then use to lower taxes and have revenue streams that can pay for other things. The government needs to think dynamically, but it doesn't. It thinks in a very staunch kind of like just take. And we get stuck in these rhythms over and over again. Yeah. We get stuck in the taxation rhythm. We get stuck in all these rhythms, and we're getting stuck in the rhythm of demonization. We're getting stuck in the rhythm of polarization. It's not positive, and it's only going to get worse. This. I'm not saying we're going to have a civil war, because I don't believe that that's possible really anymore. But this is very 1850s like, where there's like literally two countries that are forming, the coasts and then kind of the inside of the country, and it's not a healthy place to be. It's really actually a very destructive place to be. It just hurts us.
Yeah. How much of it is actually real? That's what I think about a lot too. And I just did this 10-day off the grid hiatus thing.
Yeah, how did you do that?
It was incredible. It was just incredible.
Did you enjoy it?
I beyond enjoyed it. Yeah, it was amazing. My brain got to reset, and I got to talk to actual people, and I didn't talk about politics too much,
nice.
and it was really great. And now I'm back in, and this is great too. But how much do you think is just like actually real? Like when we talk about there's two countries, or everyone's at each other's throat, and everyone hates each other, and we're all polarized, and it's never been worse, and the tenor's horrible, and all that stuff. Is that just online noise? Because if you talk to people offline, they're basically better than they are online.
Yeah, I think there's a healthy that's a healthy part of the argument, because I think that you're probably right. That I think social media has just amplified. We were talking before about how media is dying because social media has amplified voices that are otherwise disparate or otherwise would never get attention. So this does create an echo chamber of its own that's not necessarily based on a party or an idea, but based on just an argument. And that argument has obviously been fueled and has been kind of raging for some time now. So there is an element of truth to that. But I also do believe that there is a huge difference between like a Sanders supporter and a Trump supporter in a way that we've never really seen a difference between. Like there wasn't that much of a difference in 1996 between Clinton and Dole, right? Like they were really actually more centrist or whatever, and we're getting actually candidates that are more extreme.
Clinton was banging more chicks.
He was definitely banging more chicks. We don't know what Bob Dole did in his prime before he fell off the stage and all that, but I was just watching that video the other day, by the way. I hadn't seen it in a long time. What a sad video. Felt bad for him. Yeah. But yeah, so there is an element to that, but I do think we're in a very destructive place in politics right now. I think that it has a very good chance of getting worse. Like and I'm afraid of what it means for us as a society, because we're a very fickle kind of society, as republics are. So we have to really maintain sanity in any way we can, and it's not only up to us. There are people on the left wing that are also going to be, that they're also going to have to maintain sanity. The reason I really like Morning Joe so much, out of all of the mainstream media stuff, I don't watch any of that, but I like Morning Joe and I watch that, is because Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski are reasonable people that have reasonable ideas and a reasonable voice, and we need more reason.
We do need more reason. Just last night, and as you said, we were taping this a couple days before it's airing. After the Trump speech, I saw Van Jones, a guy who I consider pretty far left, who I disagree with on a lot of stuff, and I think he plays all the identity politics stuff too much and all that stuff. He said that the speech basically was good, and he said it was Trump's best moment, and he's the president now, and all that stuff. Right. And just this morning, Keith Olbermann is now tweeting that Van Jones is a sellout, and that's how the left just eats itself. But we have to talk about video games. We've done about an hour here.
I'm sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. I didn't know we were going to go that far. So let's just shift.
Okay.
Do you have a closing political statement?
No, my closing political statement is just keep an open mind. Neither side has it right. Keep an open mind.
That's a good closing statement. All right, let's shift to video games for a little bit at least. Because I was a huge gamer growing up. The amount of time I've spent playing video games, especially from the 80s to the 90s, it's incalculable probably. My first system was the NES, and we're going to jump in there in a little bit and play a little 8-bit Nintendo. When did you really get into video games, and how did you ever get to the point where you thought, man, I can make a living off of it?
Yeah, I was born in '84. I'm the youngest of 4, so my brother Dagan is the oldest, and he was 11 years older than me. So I started at a very young age, like way too young. I used to sit there 2 or 3 years old and watch him play and try to play myself on the NES. He was a huge NES gamer.
So that was the first system.
So that was the first system.
So we grew up on the same system.
Exactly. Okay. He had an Atari 2600 that I didn't really, that was put away by the time I was even cognizant, and I didn't play that until later. So the NES is still my favorite console, and this console I was brought up on. And I had these like kind of funny memories of Super Nintendo with my brother. Like my parents would put me to sleep. My brother would be playing like Final Fantasy II or something like that, and he would come knock on my door after everyone went to sleep, and I'd sneak into his room and I'd watch him play until all hours and be so groggy the next day, and everyone's like, "What? We put you in bed at like 9 o'clock. Why are you so tired?" Video games just became a part of my life, and a really important part of my life. Not the most important part of my life, but a very important hobby that I really dedicated a lot of my time and my love and my energy to. And when I was 13 or 14, I started writing on the internet. This was in '99, 2000, about games, and just actually it was a little earlier than that, I guess, like '98. And wrote on a site called GameFAQs, which still exists today, Game FAQs, and I would write these walkthroughs for old video games, Mega Man, Zelda, Mario, and I just did it for fun, just some hobby. It was very time consuming, and I like to write. And when I was 18, actually I was 17, I was just about to turn 18, IGN reached out to me and offered me a freelance position to write strategy guides, and I was about to go to Northeastern, and so I accepted that, and then I was an intern at IGN one summer, in between my freshman and sophomore years, and made a good name for myself there. And my freelance picked up, and I started doing much more. And then I graduated Northeastern, and I was about to start my grad degree. I was on a PhD course, or PhD track to get my PhD in American history. And in May of 2007, they emailed me, and they're like, "Do you want, this guy Jason's leaving, do you want a position?" I didn't even apply. And I was like, yes, I absolutely do. And much to the chagrin of my parents at the time, I was about to start grad school. I had a TA position lined up and everything, and I was like, I'm going to leave, and literally 3 weeks later, I was in San Francisco, and living in a house with 5 other guys. I was broke, and ever since, I've been in the gaming industry. It was a great blessing.
Yeah, I don't want to brag, but I don't know if you know this about me, but I was assistant manager at Electronics Boutique in Broadway Mall in Hicksville, Long Island.
Really?
For a couple of years. Nobody in '99 moved more Pokemon Red on Game Boy.
You were moving units like crazy.
They couldn't keep them on the shelf because of me. But that was pretty much, that was sort of the beginning of the end of my real gaming. I can get into the retro stuff now, but I just remember playing something. I got into PlayStation for a while, but I remember playing one of the Star Wars games with my old buddy who I referenced before, my childhood friend, and we were playing one of the Star Wars games, and we could not get out of the first room. Like, I realized my skills had deteriorated. I was used to running this way.
Right, like
I was used to
2D.
running like Mario, and instead I had to run this way, and we couldn't get out of the first room, and we laughed hysterically for about 2 hours, and then we went to the mall near him in Jersey, and we went to GameStop, which was Electronics Boutique at one time, and we just bought retro games, because we were like, all right, We can accept the limitations of what we are, and here we are.
Well, old games are better. I mean, I've always said that.
Really?
A lot of people. I totally think nothing has anything on the old Castlevania games, the old Mega Man games. I mean, those are masterpieces. Not to say new games aren't great too. I mean, I like a lot of new games too.
Is that just a nostalgia thing for you, or is it a simplicity thing? To me, it's a simplicity thing. But I know that I'm of a certain age now, and I'm a little out. So to just play those things, there's just a simplicity to it that I like.
I think it's a matter of what you're looking for, right? Like I think that a game on PS4 just came out called Horizon, which is this big,
looks awesome.
beautiful, it's a really awesome game. Yeah. Really deep story, deep world building, environmental storytelling. I'm like 45 hours into it. I mean, it's a huge game, open world.
It
game.
looks like a cross between Star Wars and Avatar.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's about a girl who it's in the future, but the world is in the ruins, and that no one knows why these robotic animals are walking around. It's really the story. It sounds so silly, but the story is awesome. It's so good. But if you're looking for that, obviously you're not going to go to Castlevania for that. But if you're looking for gameplay and simple mechanics that become so deep, those games are really hard. But it's just A and B and moving left and right.
Yeah,
I like that kind of stuff. I mean, so it is a nostalgia thing because I grew up with them. But I also think that those games are just gameplay masterpieces, and gameplay is a lost art today, as a lot of gamers know. So.
It's a lost art because they're more into the storytelling, and now it's more ephemeral, the games. Like, it's not just about mashing buttons and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's a place for that. I have no problem with that. But it's a game that will take 3 or 4 years and cost $100 million to make. Only a fraction of that's used to make the game play. I mean, a lot of it is how good are the graphics, and you hire a great writer, and John Milius wrote a game called Homefront. Like it's like you have these big names that do these things, and then you come. A good example is this game called The Order 1886, which was this big PlayStation 4 exclusive everyone was so excited about. These guys are so obsessed with the technical fidelity of their game that they almost forgot to make a game. Like it's a beautiful game, runs at 60 frames a second, beautiful graphics, whatever. It's 4.5 hours long.
Yeah.
Or 5 hours long or something like that. It's like that's not acceptable, like for a $60 product. So
Yeah,
it's a nerdy kind of tangent.
No, but but I think so many people are into this. I know it. So you now hang out with your friends. You guys play games. You guys, I told you before, when we decided to start doing the Patreon thing here, we saw what you were doing on Patreon, and I thought, holy shit, I could do this. And we modeled some of our plan to get on Patreon after you guys, and it all kind of worked. And now you guys are doing incredibly well. You have a gorgeous studio. You're doing talk show and playing games. This is a pretty sweet operation. It's
awesome. I mean, it's a blessing. I'm an easily frustrated person. I'm a very in my head kind of person, and I get frustrated and annoyed sometimes, and I have to remind myself often about how lucky I am and about how fortunate this situation is, and how generous people have been to us, and how much we change lives. I mean, I often denigrate myself by saying like what we do doesn't really matter, and I really don't, and I believe that at my core that like there's important things in the world that are being done, and when you really funnel it down to video games and stuff like that, maybe inconsequential, but it actually is important because.
But what about the eye-hand coordination? It's very important.
It is very important.
That's a very important thing, right?
It's a hugely important thing in my life. I was a goalie in ice hockey too, so I have crazy hand-eye coordination. But I get these messages often where it's like, man, my parents just got divorced, and your videos just made me laugh. For an hour, I just got to forget about that. Or my girlfriend broke up with me, or my grandfather died, and you guys just made me laugh for the first time in a month. And I'm like, that actually means way more than I thought. But you know what means the most to me actually is 100 people will tell me a day that they're going to buy Horizon because of me, but the one person that told me that they're going to vote because of me is way more important to me and way cooler. And so I try to use that place we have to not only entertain and to not only educate about video games, but also to show a different side, a Renaissance man kind of side that like you can and should be into lots of things, and you can have a political opinion, and you can be into reading and all these kinds of things, but also be into video games and not let it rule your life. And I try to show people a little bit of balance there too.
Yeah. So you're saying that a well-balanced life is the best type of life.
It is.
So it's not just about drinking Mountain Dew and playing video games 28 hours in a row.
No. I mean, hey, to each his own. Like, if you want to do that, that's totally cool.
Yeah.
But to me, I try to tell people, like, a lot of people get on my, bust my balls sometimes because they're like, well, there's the thing, on PlayStation, there's a thing called trophies. I don't know if you know anything about that.
Yeah.
And so you can look at people's trophies and see how they've done in games and what they've done, and you can look at them and be like, and people are like, well, you didn't finish this game, you didn't finish this game. I'm like, dude, there's other things in my life to do. than play video games. I appreciate that you care so much, but I want to read. I want to hang out with my girlfriend. I want to eat good food, or just lay on the couch and watch TV one day. And I think it's important to kind of keep that viewpoint. So I often try to tell our audience, like, play games. They're fantastic. They're an important art form, important medium for storytelling and escapism, which I think is so vital.
Yeah.
But at the same time, make sure to stay well-rounded. Make sure to read. Make sure to stay up on things and treat people with respect and do all these kinds of things. Get out of the house.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
I got a great idea for you.
Sure.
I want you to turn this into a $1 million proposition.
Okay.
I probably should shut the cameras right now, but I'm going to offer it to you publicly. And you have about 3 days before we post this that you can move on.
Okay.
So when I go to the mall and I walk into GameStop or I walk into these stores, I do think, man, I'd love to get back into this. I have no time. Like, I know that in reality I have no time. But if I could even find 20 minutes a day to get back in. But the idea of like getting the new system, whatever it is, Xbox or PlayStation 4 or whatever it is, and then like trying to learn everything again seems actually daunting to me versus when we go in there in a couple minutes and just play 8-bit Nintendo.
Right.
I think somebody needs to, is there a camp to train old timers, to train the Gen X guy who loves video games from his childhood, but the idea of like getting back in, it seems actually daunting to me.
I love the idea, especially in like a tutorial series where like this is how you use dual analog sticks. This is how you do, like, because there is a totally different way to play. You know, I remember even handing my mother, who has just, you know, she played Frogger and stuff. She doesn't really know, like, the idea of even using sticks to control a camera and the character is totally. Yeah, totally. But
it's a different thumb motion.
Yep. But once you learn it, it's natural for all games, just as is going left and right in Mario translates to Castlevania, translates to Mega Man.
Yeah.
I love the idea. I think it's awesome. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do.
Maybe I could hire you just as a personal consultant or something.
Well, I was going to say, I'm going to do for you. I'm going to get you a PS4.
Yeah.
And I'll get you a game. And we should just learn, you know, in the future how to, you know, I'll come back down at some point in the future and we'll sit down and we'll figure out we can stream it or something. And
that actually could be a show.
Yeah, yeah, I'll do. I swear to God, I'll get you a PS4 and I'll get you a Horizon or something, and we'll sit down and we'll figure it out together. Because I think once you get over that hurdle, it really will only take you an hour to figure out how to use dual analog sticks and figure out, well, there's a lot more buttons and stuff like that.
I couldn't get out of this freaking room. In one, like, it was like maybe the first Battlefront or something. My friend and I were 2 stormtroopers just trapped in a room for an hour. It hurt. My hands hurt at the end. I was like, what the?
We will get you over the hump. And then I bet you fall right back into it, because there's the good thing about games today, well, there's a lot of good things about games today, but one of the great things is just the diversity of games. There's just a lot of great games. There's 90-minute games. There's 100-hour games. There's storytelling games. There's games where you just watch, basically, and just, you know, there's a game called 3/4 Home that I really like, which is about a girl driving home, talking to her mom on the cell phone about things that are going on with her family, and you're just making choices, dialogue choices. But it's really riveting. It's interesting, and you never play it again. You throw it away after it's $5, play it for 90 minutes, and then you're done. Or you can buy Horizon and just lose it in 100 hours of your life, you know, and really get immersed in a story in a world. In a way that, you know, I love books, I love movies, but games are very unique in that way. And I bet you that once you got over that, because there's a psychological hump that you have to get over with the way games are played today.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I know it's more psychological than physical. Yeah, if I sit in there for a little bit, it'll all come back.
Right.
But it's the psychological.
I mean, if you want to play Call of Duty at a professional level, you need great dexterity and stuff like that. But to play a game on normal,
I got to like get a trainer at Equinox first or something.
Yeah. You don't. And I don't go down that road. I mean, I love Call of Duty, but I don't go down that road. So I'm gonna get you a PS4, and then we will go from there. I will buy it for you, and we will handle it. We can handle it in unison if you'd like. I'll leave the ball in your court.
I don't know that it's ethically right for a guest to get me a gift, but I feel that I'm willing to make that ethical jump with you. Listen, you're an incredibly sharp political mind. I didn't know we were going to go that far in politics, but I'm glad we did. We'll do this again over video games, and we're going to play some video games right now. And for more on Colin, check out Kinda Funny at youtube.com/GameOver, Greggy with 2 G's. Should we send him anywhere else?
No, you can follow me on Twitter at NoTaxation. And if I may, just real quick, keep doing what you do. Dave, what you do is essential and important. And I know it's a weird thing. I'm proud of what you do. Like, you are doing, your show resonates with so many people because you're speaking for a group of people and a generation of people and a political ideology maybe that seems underrepresented and seems rare, but it isn't. And you are speaking from the mountaintops on that, and it is a blessing to be here in this chair and to talk to you today, but keep doing what you do, and I wish you the best success.
Well, I thank you for that, and now let's play Contra.